A little while to get the microphone on, but I've got it on. Glad to have you out there, and it's always a pleasure for me to be here. I have a guest I'm going to introduce in a moment, but first I'm going to read the legal tip of the week, which is, this is very interesting. I'm going to put my glasses on, actually, to read this. I'm going to read the whole thing. It's only one paragraph. But this has to do with condominiums. And basically what it says is, the court says that this clear expression of public policy leads us to conclude that a condominium bylaw provision, so remember this has to do with condominiums, that effectively limits the ability of the unit owners, those are the tenants, the people who own units, usually have an association. The association board of directors represents the unit owners, and this concerns where there's some problem with the condominiums themselves, part of the property, and the court basically says that a bylaw provision that effectively limits the ability of unit owners to obtain legal redress for violation of these rights must be carefully scrutinized to determine whether it contravenes public policy. For example, if a bylaw were to provide that the unit owners waive all claims against the developers for any defects in construction, the court said we would surely declare such a bylaw void as contravening public policy. What happened simply was that once the condominiums were built by the developer and some of his other people affiliated with the developer owned a number of the units, and this bylaw said that 80% of the unit owners would have to vote to bring a lawsuit, and they were going to sue this developer, but he was claiming that they couldn't because they didn't own 80%. He may have owned, 25, 30, or 40% of the units, and he said, well, you don't own 80%, so you can't sue. The court said, no, that kind of a bylaw is not good. It's against what they call public policy. So, my guest, Edward Avilla,
Richard,
Constable.
thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, how you been?
Good.
So you had a little problem with the wind.
Little problem with the wind yesterday in the rain. Sitting in the house, I heard a rumble. I thought it was a large truck going by.
No kidding.
And my wife happened to look out the storm door. She said the shingles are flying off the roof, which they did. So I've got a guy over there checking it out, and the insurance has been notified. But we'll see what happens with that. But that wind was really strong. And
Yeah,
gosh,
so it made that much noise.
Yeah, it sounded like a big truck rolling through.
They were just
ripping them off.
rip them right off.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, okay, constable. People hear that word, I'm going to get the constable to serve you papers. People get nervous,
Oh,
right?
they do. They do.
When you knock on the door and you say, I'm Constable Edward Avilla, I've got papers for you.
Yeah.
What are some of the reactions you've had in the
Well,
past?
some of them are a little taken back, and some of them don't understand. So you got to try to explain the best that you can without giving too much information, from the landlord, because it's self-explanatory on the paper. A 14-day notice for rent, a 30-day notice because the landlord would like his property back. But they do get a little nervous.
How about when you serve divorce papers?
Divorce papers, I'm always a little leery about it, and through my experience, I found that the woman that gets the paper served on her, they take it a lot better than the guys, because the guys start going crazy.
Okay.
And the woman, I was waiting for that and all of this.
Yeah, I'm glad it came.
Yeah.
It's about time. But the guys take it worst, huh?
Yeah, but the evictions can be very intricate.
Well, let's mention, what about your experience in regards to someone's getting evicted, it's for possession. They, of course, they dilly-dally, it takes a while. Landlord gets frustrated. He eventually brings them to court, and then the process is, you know, it goes through the legal process. But they have a whole apartment full of items, furniture.
Well, the last part of the eviction is what they call, it's a harsh word, it's an execution. And with that execution, you legally got to serve the tenants a 48-hour notice. And the 48-hour notice includes the date and the time that there'll be a truck there to move the
So
people
a
out.
landlord is obligated to,
He's obligated to pay the whole bill.
storage company comes,
Yep, he pays 3 months storage. The moving company has to keep it for 6. The tenant does have the right to go and get their articles. The cost, I don't get into the cost with the mover, but they have to pay so much for the mover to take their stuff from the storage
who
site.
arranges for the mover?
I arrange for the mover, and I serve the papers on that. It can be a little difficult because there's times, of course, no one wants to be moved out. And now and then we'll run into a problem, but I must say that the Fall River Police Department are very cooperative.
So they'll be there sometimes?
If I have to call them, they're there, and we show them the paperwork issued, of course, by the judge. And they look at the paperwork, see it's all in order, and then we proceed.
How long is the landlord obligated to store the furniture?
The landlord has to pay for the first 3 months.
All right, and after that?
After that, the mover, the storer, has to keep it by law for 6 months.
So the storage company might be on a hook for 3 additional.
3 months plus, in
After
some
6
cases,
months?
after 6 months, they can try auctioning off some of the belongings to see if they can recuperate the 3-month storage. And after that, if they can't, a lot of times they end up having to get rid of it and possibly pay dump fees and labor fees.
So they can sell it, auction it, give it away, whatever they want to do
Whatever,
with it, or
yeah,
just
yeah.
fill up a dumpster and...
Yeah, if the tenant doesn't claim it, then after 6 months, it becomes theirs. But the landlord is on the hook for the first 3 months, plus the move itself, which is kind of tough when they're owed thousands of dollars at times with rent, and then they got to foot that bill. They do have a right to go back to court to try to get back any monies, but a lot of times that's difficult also.
Tenant might not even be around anymore.
Or they could be in another state or out of the country, or in
Yeah.
jail or whatever.
Yeah. So that's a difficult situation for landlords, that's for sure. Sometimes maybe, what about damage to the apartment?
Damages again, a lot of times the landlord will take a security deposit. And the security deposit is supposed to be for damages.
But of course, you know, and I know that damages could be way above.
Way above what the security deposit, say it was a $700 security deposit, the landlord doesn't do the security deposit properly.
All right, let's get into that. Now, what is the proper procedure?
Well, proper procedure is, and I did want to mention that I'm the constable and I get into the work, but I'm not an attorney like you, Richard.
No,
So
but,
I can give an opinion.
Yeah.
A lot of the landlords do call me, and I give them my opinion. But as far as the security deposit, it would be of my advice, and I did hear this at one of the seminars I attended with one of the judges. The judge didn't say it outright, but was more or less leaning towards stay away from the security deposit. Because if you get into court and it comes out that you did it incorrectly, you're going to owe triple damages.
So a landlord is probably better off if there's any dispute, you say, here, take this security deposit and let's call it.
Yeah. It's a good idea, I believe, to get the first month and the last month.
Yeah.
And the last month, it's always there. If the tenant says they're going to be out, then they're to return that within 30 days, the last month.
Now, the security deposit, I think one of the previous show, you explained that that money has to be put into a bank account.
That's correct.
So if it's $1,500, an account has to be opened, and
with the tenant's name, their ID number, and your bank account.
their ID number, their social security number?
Yep, their ID number, because it earns interest. And the interest is supposed to be paid yearly to the tenant.
13 cents?
Well, it still comes out the government wants their piece of it like usual.
So you got interest rate.
Yeah, they want
today
their
is-
interest.
I mean, it's almost as though you have to pay the bank
Yeah.
interest to keep your money in there.
But I remember one case where the landlord's obligation, once he does that, he's supposed to give that written statement or a copy of to the tenant to show the tenant that he did it correctly.
Yeah.
In one case that I recall, he didn't do that as far as the 30-day period, and the judge charged triple damages because he
Triple
did it incorrectly.
Yeah, that's harsh.
Yes, it is.
Now, also, Ed, I think you explained that damages must be itemized.
Damages should be itemized by a licensed 1 or 2 contractors to show it's legitimate or within the ballpark of what's the price of the damages. The court can allow that, and the landlord can go into the court to try and get that money, but then it becomes difficult. You got to locate.
Or it can be deducted from the security deposit.
Well, it can be, yes.
So if the
Yeah,
security
yeah,
deposit is $1,500, and, you know, maybe there's a few scratches on a wall that cost a couple $100 to repair.
Yeah, can come
But
off.
it has to be itemized. In other words,
Itemized and by a licensed, like I said, contractor or 2 contractors to show that it's
So-
pretty fair.
that might be a cost to bring a contractor in.
Yeah,
just to
well,
do
I imagine that can be included if you're looking for an estimate on what's to be done and
So it could be
and it's done.
$200 to repair the scratches and $50 for the estimate.
You had to come in.
Now, Fall River, a lot of landlords, a lot of tenants in Fall River. I mean, simply being a city, not like the suburbs where you get a lot of single-family houses. Do you find that there is these days additional work in a sense versus long ago?
Well, I believe it was always pretty steady, but I think this year, especially near the end of this year, it became very busy.
People
And,
being evicted?
Yes, executions with actual moves. The landlords, I kind of have some sympathy for them because they're owed the rent and they're paying the bills, and you know what it is to be a landlord today as far as the taxes and water bills and everything that goes with it, so they are having tough times. The landlords are having tough times, and you read the paper and there's a lot of houses for sale that they're trying to sell, but I was always hoping after we had the last stock market crash that things were going to change around, but I haven't seen them change around.
I just have to ask, Steve, I'm reading a little over 8 minutes on the clock. Is something wrong? What was that?
Just going to check it.
Yeah, I'll check it. 15 minutes.
15.
Okay.
Well, it's double that.
All right. 'Cause I don't think this ever happened before, but
That's because I'm on, Richard.
I said it didn't go by that fast. It started up there pretty well.
I'm surprised you noticed that. You're right on the ball.
Well, I always look at the clock. It's so important. 'Cause
Yeah,
I got to
yeah.
know when to close off the show.
Yep.
So, okay, Steve adjusted the clock. Now, when a landlord, interviews a person, they've got an apartment for rent, do you have any hints as far as
Well, the landlord,
background check,
advice to them,
application?
when they ask me, I think the first thing that they should do is go down to the housing court, Southeastern Housing Court, 289 Rock Street, and they have the computers, and the girls are very helpful there, but they can do it on their own, but they can ask the girls, and they'll check out a potential tenant that the landlord is looking at.
Well,
and
that's
see-
interesting.
Yeah, to see if they've ever been in housing court or evicted before.
All right, so That's a public record.
That's a public record, and they can check
Now,
that
can you
out.
do that online?
You can do it right, yep, I
So a
believe it's,
landlord has a computer,
yep,
can tap into the housing court
yep.
website.
www.masscourts.org.
All right, that's a real good hint for landlords.
Yep, they get in there, and there's a national network, and I believe the police department with a query check, you'll have to pay some money for that, but you can get even an idea if they've ever been in jail or if they've ever been whatever, and if the landlord wants them, at least he's getting a good hint.
Yeah, that's always been a great headache in a sense for a landlord who has someone come in, and then a few months later the rent is not being paid. But this is somewhat of a preliminary safeguard.
Yeah, what I'm seeing more of now than I used to is that the landlord will rent out the apartment to, say, a couple and even with a child, and then before you know it, they got 2 or 3 families living in there.
Okay,
And
so
so they got about 7 or 8 people in an apartment that's got 2 bedrooms.
well, as you know, if they rent to a couple,
Yep.
that's it. If they bring in additional people, that's breaking the lease or the tenant agreement.
Yeah, but it's an eviction, and that would be a cause eviction, where a 30-day notice would be in order for something like that, which takes a certain amount of time, and it's hard for anyone, even lawyers, if they're asked a question, difficult to say how long it'll be. But usually, I find it's 2 months, maybe a little better than 2 months, if everything runs smoothly,
Yeah, if it
which
runs
it doesn't, you know. Sometimes the tenant doesn't show up for that court time, and a sickness, so they continue it, and then there's discovery interrogatories, another couple of weeks. So there is a certain time delay.
So, a background check, pretty much necessary, and the housing court, going into the housing court, checking the background of a person in regards to whether they've been involved with the...
Very good.
Now, the housing court website, is that statewide?
It's state, yeah,
Oh, well, that's good. So if
Yeah.
someone's had trouble in Lowell,
yeah.
and down here looking for an apartment from a landlord, landlord could...
Yeah, it would be in there because it's mass.org.
So if someone knocks on the door, they want to rent that apartment, landlord says, have you ever been evicted before? I say, oh, no, never. And he goes into the website.
2
I
or
guess
3
that's
times.
grounds to say, you're not coming in.
Yeah,
I mean, they're already lying.
yeah.
Now, what about pets? That I'm sure has caused problems.
Well, it's a cause. Again, a lot of landlords, if they do write up a lease, which then again, it's of my opinion that a lease puts the landlord on the spot also, because you've got to have a cause to evict that person. Where owner's possession, you own the house, you don't need a lease, so you can 30-day, you want your apartment back as the landlord. But with the dogs, that is a problem today. There's 2
in
and
the
3
lease,
dogs.
you have no dogs, no pets.
Yep, that's a
and
reason.
then you go collect the
That's-
rent, and Fido's in there scratching and yelling and barking
Yeah,
at the door.
And I see a lot of it, 2 and 3 dogs a lot of times in one apartment.
That,
And those little ones seem to make more noise than the big ones.
well, as you know, they could cause a lot of damage.
Oh, they
There's this
scratch the floors,
scratching.
they scratch the doors, they bite the wood,
Yeah.
they do their duty inside the house.
Well, they say cats, when they urinate, that is really
Stink.
powerful
Yeah,
stuff.
powerful.
Then it sinks into the wood, the
wood.
cracks of the floors.
I've had it where landlords told me it went from the 3rd floor down to the 2nd floor.
Oh.
And, but landlords have it tough today. A lot of people think when we were growing up, the landlord did have some monies and they did have a respect, I feel. But today, I think that's all out the window.
Well, yeah, years ago, there seemed to be a lot more long-term tenants.
Yeah.
They moved in and they could be in there for 20 years.
15, 20 years, sure.
Yeah, even in my neighborhood, I recall people, they were just there forever.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because some of the landlords have told me, gee, the tenant was a good tenant, was there 4 years. You know, and I find that short
Yeah.
compared to, we lived in our house for 20-some years.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so, but it's just the, I guess it's the mind frame or whatever
Well,
it is.
people are in and out, a lot of transits. They come in, they leave.
gone.
They don't have jobs. They're on welfare. It's here, there, going everywhere, but nothing that's steady.
Yeah, well, Fall River, as you know, you're a little of my age. We've seen the good times in Fall River, and we're seeing, I think, some of the tough times.
So, what else might be interesting as a constable? You serve divorce papers?
Yeah,
you serve
summonses, subpoenas, letters of
summons.
different...
Give us an idea, give the audience an idea. What is a summons?
Well, a summons, it's different. A subpoena is a subpoena where you're being subpoenaed into court. A summons...
How about
always-
documents? You serve subpoenas for documents too?
Yes, in other words,
Hospitals,
keeper of records.
Yeah.
Where the subpoena, a lot of times the person doesn't have to show up. If the attorneys are looking for certain documents, they can produce those documents before the court date. But the summons always has a complaint with it. So it's a summons and complaint. It could be an insurance case with an automobile accident. That summons should be answered in 20 days after the day of service.
Yeah.
To the attorney, or if a person's doing their work.
se,
But and I don't advise that, because pro se, the saying is, you know, as far as if you represent yourself, you're representing a fool.
Well, I do lawyer of the day work down at the probate court. Matter of fact, I was there yesterday. Usually 9 to 12. And I help people who have problems.
You must be busy.
Well, it's to help the court.
Yeah.
In other words, the court has,
Yeah,
what's
certain-
happened
certain
is
ways.
that in the probate court, there are a lot of pro se litigants.
Yeah.
And sometimes, the court just gets like a little overwhelmed, and they make the person will come into the room where the lawyer of the day is, and you try to help them out in regards to what type of a case they have. Maybe it's custody, child support, they want to get a divorce, so that there's it seems to be a lot more of that
That's,
than
you must be busy,
before.
that's what I see.
Yeah. And you must see a lot of that at the housing court with pro se.
Yes.
People who show
yes,
up,
Yeah.
and they're across the table from a lawyer
Yeah.
or even a landlord.
But today, I'm seeing a lot of the young lawyers that are legal services. And I don't know if it was true or not. I heard down at the court that the landlords that filed their summonses and complaints with the court, and that fee is like $135, fee for the summons like $140. Now, I was told, if it's true or not, I don't want to believe it, but the legal service people get a piece of that money that the landlord has filed. And then the legal service lawyer works against the landlord. So it's like the landlord paying the legal service person. I'm hoping I'm wrong.
I think that could be a solid rumor,
I'm hoping it's wrong.
because lawyers are subject to the Board of Bar Overseers.
Yes.
And we have to pay for those people
You have to
who
pay.
investigate
They do.
lawyers.
Yeah,
So
they
if
do.
a lawyer does something that's not right,
Yeah. Well,
they get investigated, and of course, it's the money they've paid in each and
Yeah.
every year. We have to,
I want to say I didn't want to get into it because I was hoping it isn't true, but it could be.
it could be. So, do you find cases that have to do with pro se litigants and landlord drag out a lot longer than if there's a couple of attorneys involved?
Well, when legal service does get involved, I know the landlords have a little more difficult time because of Usually it starts with the interrogatories, the discovery, which there's like maybe 15 or 20 questions that have to be answered by the landlord, and they get kind of nervous and they don't know what to do. They come to me, I say, I can't help you.
Now, are you ever called as a witness?
Uh,
In other words, proper service of process?
Yeah, but not very
Really?
often. They usually claim that they don't get them. I pride myself on, if I got to leave it, there's one in the mail for me.
Have you been subpoenaed to testify as to whether you've served the tenant or not?
No, I haven't been called into the court as far as that goes. The courts usually side with the officer, the sworn officer, because that's our job.
Yeah.
There
So
has
as long
been
as you make that
occasion
return, that satisfies the
that
court.
reads that way. I've only heard of one case, and it was some years back, where in Boston they actually threw it out because of the case particulars, whatever it was. But usually the court, and I got to say that it's the right thing to do, because I know that the tenants are inside the apartment. You can hear them talking, you can hear televisions playing and people talking.
They don't open the door, what do you do?
They won't open the door.
What do you-
You have to leave it. I leave it at the door, usually in the crack of the door. Underneath the door is a little difficult. There might be a dog or an animal that could tear it up. So in the crack of the door, and then when I get back to the office, I make a return. And I might say that I'm supplying the post office or the federal government with a lot of stamp supply.
So it's last place of abode if you can't?
Last than usual, they call it, yeah.
Yeah.
Last and then mail.
Yeah. So, what other type of, how about commercial?
Commercial has to go to the district court, commercial properties.
right,
It doesn't
so-
go because the a housing court is for tenants.
Residents?
Residents,
Residential
correct.
and commercial?
Commercial goes to the district court.
All right, so if we might say a mill owner and they have a tenant, hasn't paid rent a couple of months, they want them out,
Yeah.
down to the district court.
District court will handle that.
So
yeah.
you get involved with service of process?
Yeah, I get businesses and garages. A lot of people don't realize
Oh,
a
garage.
garage is being rented out, and that's not a tenement. And so garages, I know one guy had 9 of them, and he rented them out. And he asked me what I would do, or my opinion, and I told him, well, you have to go to district court with that because it's like a business. It's not a tenement house.
And I guess those storage sheds, which are pretty popular,
Storage sheds. You know, it's not an apartment.
commercial.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Ed, we're down to the end of the program.
Wow, that fast.
Yeah. Anything you want to mention? You want to mention your telephone number where people can reach you?
Well, I just assume I'm busy enough as it
Okay.
is, and I've been thinking lately that I might start thinking about retiring.
Yeah.
You know, it always hurts to say that because you like to stay busy, you like to stay active.
Well, you could cut back.
Well, it's
Take certain-
difficult. You get phone calls, people heard of you or know you, and it's like I said, they think I'm a lawyer. I am not a lawyer.
Well, okay, anyway, Ed Avilla, thank you for being on the program.
My pleasure, Mr. Urban.
We'll see you again soon, hopefully, and I hope people out there get a good idea of what it's about when it comes to landlord and tenant and how to get service of process when you want to put someone out. So thank you out there for watching, and I'll see you next time.